Hello, friends around the world, and welcome to the program, Caravan to Midnight, DEF CON 2.0. And we are at DEF CON 2. We really are. We're going to have an interesting conversation coming up for you in just a moment with Jimmy from Brooklyn. He is a Communist Party infiltrator. He's been doing it for a long time. He knows what he's doing. We're not going to use his real name, of course. And the things that he has to say, I think some of it will strike you like steel. You see, it's all interrelated. The U.S. governments and banking apparatus, the European governments under the EU and their banking sector, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, what happened in Libya, the Free Syrian Rebels, Hezbollah in Mexico, all over it. Oh, Chinese debt. Ecuador's in trouble. The collapse of Venezuela. The flight and plight of refugees, some of them legitimate refugees, not the ones that came up in the so-called Caravan from Mexico. They're not legitimate refugees at all. What are they fleeing from? A nation they failed to build that had their interests in mind. So they come to our nation. This is all programmed to occur just exactly the way it's happening, which is why, with the advent of President Trump, the panic ensued. Now, I want to read something to you about what's waiting for the guilty up in Washington, D.C. This is going to happen no matter what. Geraldine Seeley wrote this. I can't pull it up on the big computer. I'm going to have to use this little one here. But this is from December 10th. So it's fresh, yes? Pentagon lawyers designing historic military tribunals to try terrorists are poring over history books and legal tomes for guidance. While U.S. law permits the executive branch to design the commissions with few restrictions, even with little regard to precedent, officials drafting the rules are reportedly keeping history in mind. America has a long tradition of using military tribunals to try foreign combatants and even terrorists, reaching as far back as the American Revolution, as a matter of fact. Most recently, military commissions were used extensively by the United States during and after World War II. And you remember, to keep anybody from talking, there was a series of executions in the basement gymnasium, Nuremberg, after the trials. But the most useful scientists, intelligence people, so forth, of the Third Reich were spirited away under Operation Paperclip. According to the book by Paul Manning, those who weren't taken by Operation Paperclip to the States had their choice of South America or the Middle East. In the Middle East, they would be assisted, of course, by the very organization that's penetrated every security agency we have, and that would be the Muslim Brotherhood. Going back to the article, in 1942, President Roosevelt used tribunals to try 8 Nazi saboteurs who landed on the East Coast, apparently to harm wartime industrial production. Hundreds of German and Japanese prisoners were tried at military tribunals, including after the fall of Nazi Germany. White House officials say the administration is carefully studying the rules and procedures used at the aforementioned Nuremberg trials, which resulted in the indictment of scores of Nazi officials and organizations charged with abetting the Nazi effort. The Nuremberg trials were distinct from military tribunals established in the United States in that they used high-ranking civilians as judges. Some experts say placing respected civilians on the Bush terror tribunals, such as retired U.S. generals or former secretaries of defense or attorneys general, would go a long way towards shoring up international support for such commissions. Quote, "The more that can be done to make this process appear like a regularly constituted court, the greater it will be received in the global community," said Sean Murphy, a professor at George Washington University Law School. The Bush team is also reportedly looking at rules of procedure drawn up for Korea War-era military commissions that never took place. The rules provided defendants with reasonable opportunity to consult with his counsel before and after defense to interpretation of charges and the substance of the proceedings, as well as any documentary evidence. The defendants were to have the right to remain silent, to cross-examine witnesses, and to a presumption of innocence until guilt is established beyond a reasonable doubt. The Bush November 13 order establishing such commissions has already said the tribunals might not carry the reasonable doubt burden of proof or other principles generally recognized in U.S. civilian courts. 1866, court says civil courts should have been used. Military tribunals, like those currently under consideration by President Bush, right, have not been used by the United States since the World War II era, but they were used even earlier in the Civil War to try suspects accused of plotting to assassinate the governor of Indiana, free Confederate prisoners, and seize the federal arsenal at Rock Island, Illinois. Abraham Lincoln, Secretary of War, decided to try the alleged conspirators, anti-war Democratic politicians, before a commission composed of military officers. Now mark that, Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War decided to try the alleged conspirators, anti-war Democratic politicians, before a commission composed of military officers. The suspects were indeed tried by the tribunal, and several were sentenced to be hanged. But the condemned men appealed their case, called Ex parte Milligan, to the Supreme Court, which decided after the war had ended in 1866 that civilians could not be tried by a military tribunal if the civil courts were open and functioning. So there's some more precedent. Why am I reading this to you? Something that has to do with the Bush administration. Decades later, FDR ordered similar tribunals to try 8 Nazi saboteurs. 4 of the saboteurs landed in Long Island in the middle of the night in a German submarine carrying a supply of explosives. And there's some more detail about that. 4 others landed at Point Vedra Beach, Florida. All 8 landed on U.S. soil in Nazi uniform, eventually ditched their military dress for civilian togs, all eventually captured in New York or Chicago. Roosevelt, declaring the suspects had no right for trial in U.S. civilian courts, appointed a military commission that subsequently sentenced the saboteurs to death. Today, many experts believe Roosevelt chose to try the suspects by tribunals because government agencies had bungled the case. Court upheld the Nazi saboteur panel. Now, why am I telling you this? Because the military tribunals are coming. They really are. And I'm going to say this again because I've said it before, and I think it bears repeating. You are literally witnessing an attempted communist takeover of the United States of America and Europe. More to the point here. Here's an email I received from a caravaner in Belgium. And she writes, many French protesting in Paris last Saturday have witnessed that the robocops present on the Champs-Élysées did not even understand French. They are part of the Eurogenfor, the European police force. They send anti-riot policemen from other countries to fight the people of a country far from theirs to make sure they won't stand with the manifestants. That's what they call a riot or a large-scale protest, a manifestation. So they want to make sure that the cops don't side with them. On the other hand, in Brussels, the yellow vests have tried to invade the EU Parliament building. The repression has been really violent. At least it seems that people are opening their eyes on who is really responsible for the collapse of our way of life and civilization. In Belgium, the Treaty of Marrakesh will bring millions of Muslims into the country legally. It's been one of the main motivations, but few media report on this issue, which is why Caravan exists, so that we can report on it, so that somebody will report on this. You know, John, I almost never drink alcohol, but the day the EU institutions will be set on fire, I'll be drinking champagne for 3 days in a row. Kindest regards from Brussels. And I won't tell you her name just because I know who she is. And she knows who we are. Yeah, get this. The Battle of the European Parliament in Brussels. Yellow vests tried to invade. Yep. This is from Vaju.com, VAAJU.com. Vaju.com. Look it up on the web, right? Yep. Here you go. The protest against Yellow West in Brussels continues to escalate. Earlier afternoon, the protesters surrounded the buildings of the EU institutions at the Belgian capital. A few minutes ago, a video was broadcast showing an attempt to invade Parliament's building on social networks. To counteract the attacks, the police used tear gas and water cannons. Protesters succeeded in blocking access to Prime Minister Charles Michel's cabinet. They threw stones and other objects against the police, chanting resignation. At about 1700 hours Bulgarian time, that's 5 in the afternoon, the prisoners are about 100. Police spokesman Lise van der Keur reported that the group attacking the European institutions buildings has about 400 people. The participants went from different parts of the city and met in front of the European Parliament, where they joined. The reason for the protests are not clear. Neither Belgium nor the Netherlands, where yellow vests also exist in the streets, has proposed an increase in fuel tax, a catalyst for the French Revolution in the last weeks. Brussels protesters used the protest wave to express anger against the overall government policy. In their words, there is an increasing economic gap between referees and voters. Attendees of all ages protest, have declared it difficult to live with today's income in the wild capitalism defended by the court. It was impressed that many senior citizens and people from the province participated, who declared that they were unable to earn income with their income. Now, this is a translation, of course. That coming social winter, and insists on both Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel and France's President Emmanuel Macron immediately depart. At the same time, local media circulate photos that show some of the protesters prepared in advance for collisions. The most aggressive of them are equipped with masks, sticks, and bottles of flammable liquids. A land protester in the Belgian capital. That's a landowner protester. There's a note down here to correct it. Ministry, quoted by local media, shows that the police have retained approximately 400 yellow jackets today, with a total of about 1,000 protesters, according to BTA. It's obvious that in late afternoon, only the strongest followers of the protest remain on the streets of the capital. At the beginning of the clashes involving 3 police officers, demonstrators were given the opportunity to withdraw, but provided they were photographed and their personal data recorded. The protest in Brussels today has not been resolved, but the authorities made it possible to mount the yellow vests. I don't really know what that means, but they prevented their access to the place they originally took, the area of the EU institutions. The movement in the city was hard-tempered in a few hours, but late in the afternoon was reported to calm the situation. Did you notice the part about the wild capitalism? What they're referring to is not they want socialism, and these people are engaging in wild capitalism. They're not talking about capitalism. They're talking about wild capitalism. I ask you again, you know, going back to that wonderful Ayn Rand quote, which I may have right here. I think I do, actually. It's a beautiful one. I'll find it in a minute. The caravan from south of the border did not just spontaneously burst into existence. This was carefully planned and carefully funded with all support by way of logistics, water, food, clothing, medical, whatever, set up in advance. You probably got doctors without borders down there. I'm surprised we haven't heard reports of white helmets being down there. They probably are. And they are not good guys, not one of them. And this ludicrous invasion of Western Europe by these Muslims and sub-Saharan Africans, the black Africans, they have absolutely nothing but need to bring to the party. Do you hate people? No. Well, then why don't you want them in here? Because they're going to destroy Western civilization. Here's the plan. The plan is invade the country with so many people that it overwhelms the welfare system. When that happens, and it won't take very long, first there'll be the paperwork bogged down, and then there'll be the emergency funding needed. Then there'll be the protests because it's not happening fast enough. And then the stupid white people, the useful idiots that Joseph Stalin referred to, those who extol the virtues of communism, when communism is nothing but a criminal enterprise. With Hezbollah all over Mexico, and certainly they are part and parcel to this migrant invasion from the south, which has been temporarily quelled. You overwhelm the welfare system, you start the protests because things are taking too long, and then you have your 1,000 or so tiny little Vietnams all over the place. The economy begins to suffer from it. The stock market gets spooked. It's already spooked. I still say they have about, I don't know, another 10,000 points to play with for it to be a legitimate and genuine stock market. It's all equities and derivatives that are inflating it up to, what was it, 26, 27,000 almost, something. It may have gone over 27,000. I don't even care anymore because it's phony. If it hits 30, I don't know, I'm going to Pago and drive an Uber. I may actually have to pull a rickshaw myself. I might even have to design a rickshaw to pull if there are any customers. But maybe there's fruit on the trees. We can eat that. Now, because Mr. Trump is in office, the program has been accelerated. At the same time, the deprogram has been accelerated. We are going to stop this, but you should know that this has all been planned. Now, last week I was talking about the CIA's MK Ultra mind control program being a real thing. It is a real thing. And this man Greenwald has spent 20 years trying to uncover the roots of it and establish the bona fides to his assertion that this thing exists and it's been deployed. Well, it has been deployed. The part that interests me the most is the mainstream media aspect of things. That would be the manipulation of large audiences. How could so many people vote for Hillary Clinton? How could so many people vote for this Beto O'Rourke moron? It's because of the carefully crafted linguistics that deliver the message. And once the message is delivered, it actually alters your brain. Linguistics, I repeat, is the study of how words and phrases actually alter the brain. And by the way, it's being shown that the main cortex of the brain shrinks in really young children as a result of what? Staring at screens. This is monstrous beyond anything you can possibly imagine to be anything akin to real. It is monstrous. It is real. But here's the good part. The good part is we know damned well now that it's not woo-woo. It's not some crazy lunatic's idea of something interesting to cast their own wonderfulness of intuition and knowledge into really sharp relief. No, it's absolutely real. It's absolutely real. There really is an initiative to use propaganda, electronically induced propaganda, not just from staring at a screen, but the brain waves actually being affected by the presence of electronic devices. Now, some people right now are saying, Wells is crazy. Yeah, they told me I was crazy when I was in the 5th or 6th grade. And these people, these two guys, had these Archer walkie-talkies. You've heard the story before, maybe. They'd reach a quarter of a mile. I said, well, mine's got a longer range. It will reach 1,500 feet. Well, a quarter of a mile is more than 1,500 feet. I mean, it's a quarter of a mile. Right. Well, a quarter of a mile is 1,320 feet, since a mile is 5,280 feet. Do the math. 4 into 5,280 equals what? 1,320. The last note that I saw pass between the two alpha holes was, Wells is cracked. Yeah, they make themselves feel better because they're the numbers stating that they're wrong, but they cling to each other emotionally, and Wells is cracked. Well, Wells wasn't cracked then, and Wells not cracked now. This is real. This is really, really happening. Ayn Rand, the fountainhead. The hardest thing to explain is the glaringly evident, which everybody has decided not to see. Oh dear. That's what's happened to us. Absolutely, positively. Now, there's other stuff out there too. I want you to remember a phrase that my father spoke to me. I asked, who's behind all of this? You know what his answer was? The jihadis and their backers. Now, from globsec.org, that's global security. Who are the European jihadis? From criminals to terrorists and back? Midterm report. It says GlobeSec is proud to present who are the European jihadis from criminal to terrorist and back. Midterm report. My co-authors, there's a whole bunch of unpronounceable names. I'll give it a shot here. Kakper Rekovic, Stanislav Matkia, Viktor Zux, Thomas Benuska, Karen Kazarova, and Jakub Rafe. This is the second major output from a 2-year research project focusing on the existence of the presumed criminal terrorist nexus in Europe. Watch Europe. Oh yes, where America goes, Europe follows, but it always starts in Europe. Just like the last 2 big world wars started in Europe. It is very important that we watch Europe and get our news from Russian publications, which you take with a grain of salt, of course, because they always have a political interest in mind, always, but alternative news sources like this one, for example. This project I'm talking about here is funded under PMI Impact, a global grant initiative of Philip Morris International to support projects against illegal trade. The money again. GlobeSec is fully independent in implementing the project and has editorial responsibility for all views and opinions expressed herein. The findings of this report are based on a data set of 225 cases of individuals about whom the authors were able to collect open source data between September 17 and June 2018. Of these, 197 out of 225 cases are jihadi terrorists, and 28 effectively comprising the project's control group are far left or nationalist Greek terrorists. They were all arrested for terrorism offenses in 2015 and later convicted, expelled from a given country because of their alleged terrorism links, or died while executing terrorist attacks. In the 11 examined EU countries, Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, the UK, included is also a sample of 28 suspects who are still at large and are sought by security authorities, 15 of which have already been convicted in absentia. I really believe, I sense, as well as think, that this is phenomenally important. Well, the phenomenon of the crime-terror nexus, meaning the scale of the overlap between the two milieus in Europe, and the intensity of their interconnections is at the heart of the report. However, GlobeSec's multifaceted focus on different subjects of European terrorists and disciplined and thorough data collection allow for a broader analysis of the phenomenon of jihadi terrorism threatening Europe. Thus, this report should also be seen as GlobeSec's take on the state of European jihad and an attempt to map out its features. That's in addition to the rest of the report. You will find an analysis showing preliminary conclusions along 8 thematic sets of variables. Now mark this: crime-terror nexus, age and gender, education and employment, financing of terrorist activities, radicalization, citizenship, meaning national origin, foreign fighting experience, and solo actor phenomenon. All right? Then, I want to go over to this page and just give you just a little bit of it, just a little bit to chew on. I will have this entire thing published for you to either go to the site and download it for yourself or read the PDF on our site. All right? Education and employment of European jihadis. Data on the education of European jihadis is surprisingly scarce. The authors were able to collect reliable information on educated backgrounds in only 49% of the cases in the data set, 96 out of 197. For this reason, the following findings should be treated as preliminary while the authors continue to fill the gaps in knowledge on this variable. Europe's jihadi terrorists are not especially well educated, with only 9%, 18 out of 197 finishing high school. Only 3 of those later completed their BA studies, and 2 of the 3 are in the criminals turned terrorist subset. At the same time, the latter group is even less educated in general, as only 5% of terrorists with criminal pasts, 3 out of 56, made it through their secondary education. With relevant data for 75% of the data set, 147 out of 197, the authors are confident in concluding that the employment careers of European jihadis are far from impressive, since almost 40%, 78 out of 197, were unemployed at the time of their arrest, death while staging a terrorist attack, or expulsion for alleged terrorism association. Simultaneously, only 28% were employed, and their jobs varied from services, 21 individuals, and administrative or clerical jobs to construction, and 15 others still enrolled as students. The statistics for the criminal turned terrorist look even bleaker, with 52%, 29 out of 56, unemployed at the time of their 2015 arrests, killing, or expulsion. How do European jihadis finance themselves? The low education levels and lack of success in their professional lives could suggest that European jihadis are more prone to financing their terrorism careers via illegal activities. However, this does not seem to be the case, as European jihad is financed by a variety of different, mostly legal sources. What's more, the gathered evidence suggests that past criminality does not rule out seeking legal means of financing terrorist activities in the future. These findings have the caveat that reliable data on how individual terrorists finance themselves are often hard to come by, as the data set includes information on this variable in relation to only 39% of the cases, only 78 out of 197. Among these 78 individuals with available and relevant data, the biggest group are jihadis that used exclusively one purely legal source of financing, such as savings, salary, or benefits. That's 31 out of 197. Another group used various combinations of these legal sources to sustain their terrorism careers. 18 out of 197. An example is individuals who mix incomes from salaries, benefits, and/or savings to finance their terrorist futures. This finding dovetails with the observation by Peter Nesser and Sternenson and Emil Offedal, who studied jihadi terrorism plots in Europe and concluded that 43% of these were legally financed, and that, contrary to widespread notions of a crime-terrorism nexus, criminal activities are not a very common source of funding for attack plots in Europe of late. Well, what does that mean? A group of 10 individuals, 5% of the data set, used a mix of legally and illegally obtained financial means to fund their terrorism activities. Amongst them were individuals functioning in different countries at the same time who were both involved in violent robberies and also happy to receive benefits from the state. In a further surprising twist to the crime-terror nexus stories, the authors encountered another group comprising 9 out of 56 of the criminals turned terrorists in the data set who used solely legally obtained funds to sustain their terrorism careers. And so, when the demands, we're ahead of it so far, but when the demands come for more support, for more money, because they want a better life. Oh, sure, some of them do. Everybody wants a better life, right? But a lot of this money is going to come from our own government's coffers to finance terrorist activities here, which as soon as the left and right get a little more agitated, those terrorist attacks will begin. They're already seeding our thought processes with the idea that ISIS is threatening to carry out rifle attacks in New York City. ISIS is threatening this, ISIS is threatening that. Well, I thought it was Al-Qaeda before. Well, now it's ISIS. And ISIS and Al-Qaeda are U.S. constructs. We know this now. We absolutely know this. We're the ones who set bin Laden up. And does anybody really believe that the great Obama just put on his cape and arranged for bin Laden to be assassinated, buried at sea with no photographs, given full Muslim honors? You can always tell when someone's lying when they add on just way too much detail. Just way too much. And that's what the Obama administration did, and that's what the Bush administration did before him. And this is why the left and the right, not all the right, but some of the right, I mean, I'm talking about the ones who are in positions of authority in Congress or just taking up space in Congress and just their very presence being the support and all that they can possibly contribute to the party. What is the party? The party is the undoing of this country. You keep hearing the word democracy over and over and over again when it's not a democracy. It has never been a democracy. It is a constitutional republic, and there is an enormous difference. Oh, that's just semantics. No. That's like saying the gold fringe on the flag in the courtroom. It's just, no, that's just decoration. No, it's not. Do you know, people are, to use the time-worn phrase, thrown under the bus by the legal system every day all across this country because they simply don't know what court they're in. And something happens between the two attorneys, and they have a little conversation with the judge, and suddenly they have no case. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Now the state has a case against them. Why? In the wrong court. Different court, different rules. Now, at this point, you may be going, oh my gosh, where are you going with this? The system has been manipulated to the point that it is almost untenable. It's just like continuing to modify your car. You start off with some, I don't know, a Camaro back in the old days or something. By the time you're finished with it, you've built an engine that the car won't withstand. It won't withstand the power. You'll twist the frame. You'll destroy the car with the engine if you dare to open that throttle all the way up. You've modified the suspension. Well, it does things fine in a straight line, but it doesn't turn or stop very well. You've lightened it now, so there's no, you got to take seats out, and you're wearing a lap belt because the roll bar's got to go because it's too heavy because you want to get the maximum performance out of it. In this case, our Camaro that I'm talking about is our stock market. And what eventually happens is you crash the car. What happens then? When you crash the economy, socialism begins to look really good. The government will take care of us. There are so many paradoxes. There are so many contradictions going on, even in the minds of people. You have to wonder, where is this coming from? Now, it's one thing if in the early part of the 20th century, people simply woke up one day and there are armed people all over the place. Okay, that's pretty cut and dried. We just went through a revolution. And millions of Christians wind up being murdered. Why Christians? Why not Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus? Why Christians? Because Christianity is real. The other ones have been able to sustain their societies, but how high did those societies rise? Well, not as high as the Christian civilizations, I assure you. Feudal, communistic, socialistic to the point of collapse, and then what? Oh, then they want to, the ones who allowed it, then look to others in other countries to help them. Better yet, let us come where you are. And as we're witnessing in Texas, which could at some point turn blue. People are so stupid, they flee these failed democratic cities and states, and they come to Texas, but unfortunately they don't leave their political baggage in the state they just fled from. They bring it with them. They have the idea that communism, it's not the problem of this. The problem's not the ideology, it's just the implementation that's been the problem the whole time. They are in some ways stupid, but in other ways they cannot be blamed for it because they have had plenty of help getting into the stupid car. Plenty of help. Continual reinforcement that the very things that at one time they thought were the wrong things to do are actually the right things to do. We are on the verge of being ticketed for the wrong Christmas song. We're on the verge of being arrested for saying anything that might affect some transgender's feelings. I don't care about the gay agenda. What I care about is the money behind the gay agenda, which is designed to promote the gay agenda so that it further erodes and shreds the foundation and the fabric, respectively, of our civilization. This has been going on for a little over 100 years, just a little over 100 years. That's not that long. It really isn't. I think for the first time, on the 77th anniversary of the 7th of December, 1941, there were no more living Pearl Harbor veterans. They've all passed beyond the veil. One lifetime, one long lifetime, from people born in the 20s and the late teens of the 1900s to last Friday, 7th of December. So you see, if you say, well, it's been going on for 100 years, don't have a Conestoga wagon and teams of horses in your mind. It's not that long ago. Evil, which is communism, is very, very patient. And those people are very, very smart. They understand that it will take time for this to all soak in. And when it has soaked in, the people it's soaked into will be fully committed to this ideology. The next thing that you'll hear is that God's not going to help you with anything. That's just something that it's made up in your mind. It's a myth that's been perpetuated for all these centuries just to make you feel better about yourself. But you know, we can make you feel better. We of the government, we care about you. We will do things for you, tangible things that you can see. There's no God that's going to do anything for you. That's their story, folks. And they're going to stick with it because they are evil. The ones who are promoting this, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, they're of their father, the devil. Some of these people in Washington and all around the world, these big capitals in Europe, well, they very much believe in Satan. They worship Satan. They call him Lucifer. They don't want to use the S word. They'll go with the L word. Because it's a linguistic, it suggests luminescence, light. They used to call the old matches back in the 1800s Lucifer matches. Why? Because they are the bearers of light. Yeah. You can read that in Tom Sawyer. But you won't see a copy of the book Tom Sawyer in any grammar school now. Oh no, because it's racist. We're on the brink. And in the not too distant future, we're going to be presented with a choice. Go left all the way, or fight in order to go right. Please understand, this armed rebellion in the streets is something that every once in a while I think might be a good thing. But I inevitably change my mind. It will not be a good thing if for no other reason, man, and there are other reasons, of course, loss of life being among them, destruction of property, retardation of the economy, things like that. The biggest reason to be against civil unrest is that this is what is wanted by the maniacs on the left. They want armed insurrection. They are just waiting. They are just stomping their feet, waiting for that gate to open so they can reveal themselves to be the bloodthirsty savages and backward-thinking people that they are. You must be prepared to defend yourself from force, with force. You must be prepared to do this. But we can't start it because that's what they want. They want to continue to goad and prod and insult and ridicule until somebody gets mad enough to go and, take their shooting iron to a baseball game practice like the idiot leftist did and wound up almost killing Scalise. Know your enemy. And trust me, you have one. If you believe in God the Father, if you are a Christian who believes in Jesus the Christ, these people are your enemy, and they will not peacefully cohabitate with you. Their initiatives must be crushed. Those who are in schools and at university, indoctrinating students with communist doctrine must be removed and driven into destitution. They must not be allowed to publish any material whatsoever. Wow, man, that sounds like communism itself. No, it's just that with every tumor that you cut out, a little good flesh has to come with it, or the tumor will come back. Once we have agreed that communism will not work in the interest, of human freedom, once we've identified it as the tumor, then we have to cut it out. Well, there's freedom of the press. Yeah, but there's not freedom of distribution. You can write anything that you want, but you are not free to distribute it. Are you free to distribute bomb-making plans, nuclear, pipe bomb, anything else? You decide to just do a mailer and send out a bunch of that stuff. You think that'd be well received by the government? It wouldn't. You would be arrested. You cannot promote things that, in the wrong hands, once those things are read, will result in the harm being done to persons. You can't do it. It's against the law. Well, these people are teaching our children, those who are going to inherit this mess and run it, unfortunately. They're putting bomb-building plans into their heads, but it's not the typical kind of bomb we might think of. Not the round black one with the fuse on it, not the one that drops from an airplane with fins on it. It's the worst possible kind of bomb. And I'm pretty sure you know what kind of bomb I'm talking about. It's an idea bomb that is so powerful, it actually changes the thinking process of the one that it's dropped on, to the point that they believe that you're crazy if you assert that 1,500 feet is more than a quarter of a mile, because a mile sounds so much bigger. That's what we're dealing with, and that's linguistics. And Jimmy from Brooklyn is next. By the way, come on over and visit the Caravan to Midnight stores. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. Some of it, I couldn't believe it when it was presented. It's like, do you like this? Like, yeah. You like that? Yeah, I really do, including my favorite coffee mug for taking on the road. It has fit into every cutout for holding a cup in every vehicle that I've carried it to. So it's the perfect size. You know, some of them are like, hey, it fits, but it's a little wobbly there. No, this one fits, but it'll actually tip over out of the socket. These won't. We got clocks, we got shirts, we got shoes, we got all kinds of stuff. And it is through your visitations to our store that we're able to keep going here and try and actually do something for the world instead of just taking from the world. It kind of seems like a nice thing to do. It seems like a necessary thing to do. In fact, yeah, I'm sure of it. I've thought about it and thought about it, and I'm sure of it. This is a mission. This is not a job. This isn't a storefront. We have to get this done. You and I and those you know and those whom we know. We have to get this done. We have to, or we're going to lose the entire nation, and it will never rise again. The world will be cast into the darkness of quite possibly 1,000 years. Can you imagine? We could have a brilliant future, but we're letting emotional/identity politics run everything. Remember the phrase, control your emotions or they will be your downfall. Well, the ones on the left can't control their emotions, and they're not very intelligent to begin with. Highly educated, but not real smart. Just because they spend a bunch of time at a university or college does not make them smart. It just makes them veterans of indoctrination camps and nothing more. So support Caravan. If you're not a member already, join us. It's inexpensive. It's well worth $60 a year. And it's extremely well worth $95 for a year and access to our vault containing all of the recordings, every moment of every speaker at Operation Classified, which was held last month on the 9th, 10th, and 11th. Okay, I just want to toss that in at the end, as I said. Jimmy from Brooklyn is next, but not until this beautiful musical interlude has concluded. Be patient.